In publishing, there's a lot of excitement around the debut, but what if you want to write a second cookbook that is wildly different from your first? Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Kate Leahy, and I'm here today with Andrea and Wynn. Hey, Andrea!
Hey!
So we have a fun conversation today. You know how we talked about entertaining cookbooks last winter? They're having a moment.
Yes.
So today, we're going deep into a single subject entertaining book.
Getting hot and spicy with hot pots.
We are. So today, we are going to be talking with Natasha Pickowicz. She is the author of Everyone Hot Pot, Creating the Ultimate Meal for Gathering and Feasting. It's very different from her first cookbook, which was called More Than Cake.
Yeah, she was like all over, sweets in her debut cookbook. It was a James Beard finalist, and she's a well-known pastry person and professional chef. But then all of a sudden we get this little book on hot pots. What's up with that, right?
I know, that's quite a pivot and a very interesting one. So let's get her on to get more information on how this book came to be. Natasha, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations on your new book, Everyone Hot Pot, Creating the Ultimate Meal for Gathering and Feasting. We can't wait to talk about that book, but first we wanted to rewind a little bit and talk about how you got your debut cookbook, which is on a completely different subject. Your book was More Than Cake. How did that book come to be?
It's funny because there were actually a few false starts, I think, to that book. A lot of people are familiar with my work as a pastry chef and my background working in fine dining, working in restaurants. And I had actually connected with my book agent, Kitty Cowles, the winter of 2019. So you could kind of do the math around when that was.
Right. Because More Than Cake came out in 2023, correct?
Spring 2023, yeah. And she had approached me because her daughter had volunteered at these fundraising bake sales that I was doing at the time for Planned Parenthood. And she was like, Mom, you have to meet this cool baker and she should do a book or whatever. And so her daughter actually kind of brought us together, and I worked on a draft of a proposal that was about my repertoire of working in restaurants and the story of running these big restaurant teams and my experience in that world. And to be quite honest, I did not feel prepared or like I deserved to write a book that was more personal, that was about, baking rituals at home. I felt like the only lens I could offer was through restaurant work. And then what happened next? The pandemic began in full force. I lost my job working in restaurants. I remember just feeling bereft and going to Kitty and saying, well, what? I can't write this book now. I don't work at these places anymore. What do we do? The book agent, she's my biggest cheerleader. She's my advocate. And she was such a grounding force in that period. She was very take a minute. You have so many stories inside of you. We will figure out what the book is going to be. We will rework the proposal. And we landed on this idea of how much I love to bring people together and these gatherings that can happen around pastry and baking specifically, and how community is sort of created and enforced by these rituals. This kind of, not to jump ahead, but that's what Everyone Hot Pot is all about as well. And we sold the book that summer of 2020. And in a way, now looking back, I feel really grateful that it all kind of worked out the way that it did, that my first book wasn't about being an employer at someone's restaurant and the time there, but it was about something that felt actually a little bit more personal and specific to me, like the autonomy I had in the recipes and everything like that.
Natasha, a lot of chefs who want to write cookbooks end up working with a collaborator. Kate and I have both worked on chef books. You wrote your own. So tell us a little bit about what led you from chefing from the kitchen to a keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah. From writing to cooking and back to writing. I would say the writing piece of the cookbook thing probably drew me in even more than developing the recipes themselves. I It was the hardest part of the process for me, but it was also, when you could get into that rare flow state and the essays are coming out and the head notes are coming together. I mean, that was probably the most exhilarating part of writing the book. That, the most profound part of the process for me was getting to do that part myself. But, I was an English major. I had aspirations of being a music and arts journalist when I was in my 20s, and always kind of saw myself as doing something around writing, whether it was arts criticism or more personal writing. But I never thought it would be a cookbook. That was a big surprise. So, in some ways, my chef journey has brought me back to writing as this discipline that I had first fallen in love with, and then completely fallen out of practice around because, I was working 70 hours a week in restaurants, like no time to have any kind of meaningful writing practice at all. But cookbooks really brought me back around to that. And my early, versions of my manuscript for More Than Cake were embarrassing at how long-winded and that they got. I remember because my editor, Judy Prey, was like, I think we can like tighten up some of these head notes, and, maybe you don't need this digression about like Morello cherries and Chekhov short stories. And I was like, don't I though? But
I want to. Right.
yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, so I think like being able to play around with words and writing, but through my passion, which is cooking and baking, like that has definitely been, yeah, super profound part of the process for me.
And with More Than Cake, I mean, it's in the title. It's not just about cake. Tell us a little bit about the More Than and how you landed on that, because it's a very clever title.
Yeah, well, I can't take credit for it, unfortunately. I write about it a little bit in the book introduction, but I was at a career fair at the Food and Finance Education High School in Hell's Kitchen. I came in to talk about being a pastry chef in front of all these like ninth and 10th graders. It was so sweet. Like a week went by and then I got 30 emails in my inbox. Like obviously the teacher was like, say thank you to Natasha or whatever. And I got all these sweet emails. And this one kid wrote in and he said, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about your work and being a pastry chef. And you've taught me that being a chef is so much more than cake. And thank you. And that phrase, I felt like he got it, and I think anybody who goes into hospitality has a love of cooking and ingredients and food. But more to the point for me, it was really about being in community with kitchen team and connecting with guests and feeding people and the feelings that sort of engendered. And yeah, just as a little phrase, it really stuck with me. And that was the working title in my proposal, and it stayed.
So then, like, Everyone Hot Pot's an interesting title because it's not mainstream English.
Yeah.
I only say that because, I speak Vietnamese and I learned Mandarin in college. So,
Oh, I took Mandarin in college too. Amazing.
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
It's a little cheeky. I think that
Yeah.
there's a tendency in American English in the United States to make nouns into verbs. So I really like the idea of hot pot as a meal or as a collective noun becoming this active verb, like let's go hot pot tonight. Do you want a hot pot? And that's kind of how I would employ it in a sentence casually. And so I like this idea of having it be almost this like call to action, everyone hot pot. And I wanted it to also have that feeling of like inclusivity. And I think, and maybe this is something you've come across when working on your books too, but I wanted the material to feel open to people who weren't familiar with the cultural aspects of the cuisine, the ingredients. I really wanted anybody to be able to pick it up and say, hey, maybe hot pot's for me too. And I want to do this.
So you have More Than Cake. The book comes out. It's your debut, and it's a great debut. It gets a lot of attention. It's lauded and it's beloved, and it finds an audience, I'm assuming, with probably a lot of people who love baking. So that's 2023. This is now 2026 as we're recording. You have Everyone Hot Pot. How did you convince your editor and your agent to even like entertain the idea, and how much pushback did you get from them?
If I'm being honest, I think I had to convince myself more of the idea than my editor or my agent. But I think there were a couple of things that were happening there. One, I felt so much pressure imposed by myself around external forces for that first debut book to feel like it mattered or was contributing to, the conversation in some way. I had a lot of, imposter syndrome, insecurity, feeling like I tricked my publisher into buying this book for me. Does the world need another chocolate chip cookie recipe? I felt a lot of pressure at how do I distill my whole career into, this one statement, like the best of Natasha. I've been thinking a lot about like what do sophomore releases feel like and what does that follow up? And for me, I felt more relaxed and loose precisely because it wasn't what people were expecting from me. Like I felt like there was almost nothing on the line because people weren't like, oh, she's the lady who makes cakes or does the bake sales. Like people have no expectations and I could hopefully subvert them or surprise them in some way. And honestly, I didn't feel like I could write another book about baking. Like that was a decade plus of recipes I had tinkered with.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them. A lot of them were created new for the book, but that was blood, sweat, and tears. Like I felt like I had nothing left in the tank.
Yeah.
The thought of developing more baking recipes after that, I was like, I just don't think I could do it. And Kitty, at the time, I was doing a lot of hot pot pop ups at places around New York. I'd written a story for New York Magazine about hot pot at home, and I felt like a little whisper of a zeitgeist deep something. Like I felt like the world post COVID was ready for an interactive meal. It was about sharing, that was about getting a little messy, that was, unpretentious, and gathering and hosting at home felt like a trend that was really taking off too. People just wanting to gather and being at home. So hot pot was just a meaningful meal to me because of how I grew up with it, doing it at home with my parents and friends and family. In the research that I did, I felt like maybe there's something here. There's not a book devoted to this subject in the way that I wanted to write about it, which is, Chinese hot pot with a twist, like my baking recipes are, it's chocolate chip cookie with a twist, So I felt like while a lot of terrific books in the last 5 years had perhaps touched upon hot pot in a chapter or in like a big, nice, beautiful spread, there wasn't a whole book just devoted to the topic. So Kitty really pushed. She's like, I think we should do this. She's thinking about it in a strategic way that I hadn't considered, where she was like, hey, I think you have savory books inside of you, more general interest topic books. Maybe this is the single subject shoots and ladders that gets you to another part of the board and can kind of get you away from people thinking about you and just pastry and baking. But maybe this is how we can kind of like move you in that direction. And the more I thought about it, the more I got excited about the topic. And we just went back to Artisan. I didn't want to work with anyone else. You spend so much time developing relationships with people. You don't really want to start over if you don't have to. And I love Judy and the whole team at Artisan. So I was kind of shocked when they bought the book because it was right around when More Than Cake came out and we didn't know how it was going to be received. So the fact that they just like bought this book for me, I hadn't really proven myself to them yet. I think that shows a lot of faith on their part too, which really meant a lot to me.
So you wrote the proposal, and you conceived of this idea, you hatched it with Kitty in between the period when More Than Cake went to print and when it came out. So like 6 months?
Exactly.
Okay.
That fallow kind of waiting.
Right.
And it all really happened together. We kind of sold the book right when the More Than Cake was coming out. So I was sort of dealing with both of those things concurrently. Yeah.
That's a really interesting situation for just people listening to the podcast who are writers to think about, because a lot of times one of the hardest parts of publishing is like hurry up and wait. And there are these times where all you're doing is waiting because your book is sent to the printer and you're not going to see it for 6 months. So what do you do in that time? And here you're kind of hatching this new idea. So that's, if I get the timeline right, that's 2023 where you're getting the deal for Hot Pot while More Than Cake is coming out. So it's still like, there's still a lot of time also to write this book.
Totally. Parts of it felt breakneck still, like pace wise, but
what parts?
I mean, not to get too granular, but I think like we shot Everyone Hot Pot across 6 days in New York City, 4 locations, which is bananas. That's a lot of locations to set up, load in, load out. It was a heat wave in June, shooting a book about hot pot. So there's some dissonance around that for sure. And that felt a bit breakneck. I think also the manuscript writing piece feels more leisurely because there's less intervention from the editorial side. It starts to feel tight when you're in that second, third, fourth pass, when the book is being designed, laid out. Like that's when it kind of gets real. When I'm making selects of photos, when we're landing on the book design, like I feel like those are decisions that it's just not my expertise. So, but you don't never have as much time to kind of linger over those decisions as you want, maybe. So I think that is kind of when it started feeling real.
I love the front matter of the book, especially all the history stuff that you have in there. I always geek out on that sort of stuff. That's different than For More Than Cake, right? I mean, like you have the history of hot pots and going back centuries.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the structure of the book, because it's interesting. I've written single subject books, and it's always like, how do you get people into this? And how do you take them on that journey? And here you've got the front matter, all like the stuff you need. And then you've got hot pot menus, and then broths and sides, and then desserts and drinks. And then there's like hot pot personalities. You know, it's
Yeah.
a lot of really fun elements in there. How did you create that flow for yourself so that it worked as a cohesive book?
I feel like readers, there's so many titles out there, there's so much available. And I think that readers love a deep dive. And I mean, I think your books are amazing examples of this too. And so I was really excited to like have that super up close focused thing, whereas More Than Cake was kind of a general interest, like a little bit of everything in the baking world. You know, this was really an opportunity to really zoom in. And the history piece was actually interesting. And I think I felt more like a duty to provide context around the meal instead of making it about me right away, especially because I'm doing it through this lens of I'm US born, child of immigrant. So I have this kind of like diasporic lens that I know Chinese food through, working in New York, being alongside many disparate cuisines and people, and wanting to incorporate that into my own approach. But I still wanted to situate it in like what I knew of as hot pot, specifically in China, because, you know, as you know, this is a tradition that occurs not just in China, but all over East Asia, Southeast Asia, and honestly, like the world. But I had to keep it through what I felt like I was more of an expert on. And I was nervous about getting some of those details wrong. So my dad is a Chinese historian, and he actually fact checked the manuscript for me. Not because I didn't think the copy editors at Artisan wouldn't do a bang up job, but I just knew that he would be able to catch really subtle, nuanced things talking about something like the history of China. Like he helped me with stuff like the pinyin romanization of Chinese characters. Like, do I add tones to those words or not? Like I agonized over that.
Why didn't you?
So basically, I talked about this with my dad, and even though he's a scholar, he's an academic, I think he's a populist at heart. He was like, you know what? People are going to get bogged down in the tones. They're not going to really know. Anyway, just give them the word. That's going to convey everything that they need to know about that. And I think he was right. You know, I'm happy I did that for me and for what. Whereas, you know, other people like Clarissa Wei wrote the great book Made in Taiwan. She included Chinese characters plus pinyin with the tones. That was the great decision for her. This was just something I decided on with my dad. And I felt like having him support me through that decision making process, like validated my choice, I think, a little bit, and made me feel like I was doing the right thing for this text.
Yeah, I ask you that because there are a lot of people who listen to Everything Cookbooks and who are making cookbooks that are multilingual or at least bilingual. And you're always having to make the decision of how do I represent this cuisine in English so that it is digestible for my audience? Do I remove all the diacritics or do I put them in? What does that say about my authenticity level? And so those are decisions that honestly kind of go to and from, and they come in waves, and there's no right or wrong answer, to tell you the truth. Absolutely none. But I was curious as to what your decision-making process is, because you are Chinese and because your mother's born in Beijing and your father's a Chinese scholar and you've learned Chinese. So, the tones are supposed to be there, but you decide to not. And then because I've made that decision on a couple of books and I'm like, I'm not going to make it so hard for people.
Exactly. I really appreciate that perspective because I did waffle on it quite a lot. And I think at the end of the day, all cookbook authors want are for people to engage with the material. And I think there is such a balance that you can strike with doing the material justice and giving it the most rich, meaningful context imaginable without perhaps like these things kind of getting in the way of readers accessing that information. So, and I did feel pressure, like I think also being biracial, like I felt some pressure around like, gosh, how do I insert myself as a expert without feeling 100% Chinese myself? And the book writing process was actually like an incredible way for me to immerse myself in that world actually in a way that made me feel incredibly proud to identify as Chinese. So, and especially like the timing with the book release intentionally was came out days before the Lunar New Year, and being able to celebrate the book release during this holiday period as well was like I think very culturally meaningful for me to be on tour in San Diego alongside my parents during my favorite holiday. It was so in some ways it's like I think the nerves I had around being an authority on this subject, the process of actually doing it reaffirmed this like idea that I should be doing it to begin with. Kind of circular, but like it's like a fake it till you make it, which is how I felt with the first book, honestly, and maybe we'll always feel that
Right.
way.
I
So
think we all feel that way.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
I did want to circle back to your dad because also he has an essay in the book.
Yeah.
I was curious, we're going to talk about your mom in a little bit, but I did want to just go back to your dad's essay, which talks kind of about like setting the stage for a hot pot night. There's a quote in there that says, once the hot pot stage is properly set, it was time for the members of the audience to become players. It was time to eat. Like he has this like very kind of like charming essay.
Oh, it was utterly charming.
I've never thought about asking my parents to write an essay in a book. I mean, that's just, it's kind of unique. How did that idea come to mind?
I mean, I think that first of all, I connect my lineage to hot pot equally through both of my parents. My dad is a New Englander, but he's a Chinese scholar, and my relationship to hot pot is just as much about him as it is about my mom. And I think because my mom illustrated my first book, More Than Cake, so I knew going into this one that I really wanted her to do it again because the subject matter actually felt relevant to her. I mean, she was like, for More Than Cake, she was like, I would give her lists of ideas of illustrations, and she's like, what's a whisk? What's a offset spatula? What's a, like she had no clue and did an incredible job. But for this, I felt like she was flying, like she was so comfortable with the material. So I think because I got her involved, I really felt like I wanted to get my dad involved too and just have it be more of a family affair. Like once I started looking at old photos and wanting to scan in old archival photos of them from the 80s and 70s, I just felt like he was a part of that story. So I asked him for an essay because he's such like a grandstander. He loves, give him a mic. He loves to kind of opine, and he just, he's a professor. Like he loves standing in front of a crowd and educating people on something. And I think I really have that from him too. Whether we're at a hot pot table and there's someone there who just never done it before, he will talk your ear off about all the nuances. So I felt like originally the idea was I was just going to interview him for essays I was going to write about like symbolism and ingredients and numbers and traditions and rituals and drinking culture and where to sit and everything. And then I was like, you know what? No, this would be better just coming from him. And I'm so glad he did it. Both of my parents are just extremely good with deadlines too. They turned both of their
Oh,
submissions around so quickly. It was a dream.
did you have to edit your dad though? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean the lightest of touches, I would say. I did hardly anything. It came in polished and done basically. I think that once the artist and copy editor got her hands on it, I think they made a couple of stylistic things, maybe around punctuation or something like that. But It was basically clean, done. He's a very straightforward way of talking. Like when you think of academics, like you think kind of more impenetrable language, and that is just not how he communicates information. And so I knew it would be not a dense thing that he would write for the book. It would be something really fun and convivial, which is what I wanted. So he told me the idea he had about this theater extended metaphor. And all I asked was that he worked in a couple of things around, oh, what food symbolizes this and where does the guest of honor sit? Just like little bits of information. And that was it. And when I was in San Diego for my book tour, I asked him to read his essay aloud as part of the event run of show. And he did that. It was amazing. Yeah.
Nice.
Did he critique you? I mean, he fact checked, but did he also edit in the process? Because I mean, he is a college professor.
Yeah, who probably proofread every essay I ever wrote in middle school and high school. So he was very involved with my schoolwork growing up. I mean, they were extremely, it's such a cliche. I was like, all APs, cum laude, sports, piano, blah, 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 like all the things a good daughter of an immigrant would do. And he was very involved with my schoolwork. And so this was, I could feel myself like becoming that high school student again, like getting the edits from my dad. I would be like, this is getting it's a little wordy here, or I think you could tighten it up there. And I was like, okay, Dad. But I did take it all to heart.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was fun,
That's good.
I feel more confident about my writing than I did perhaps in high school feel. So I think I had a little more agency around how I was receiving that feedback.
Let's go into the recipes for a bit. We talked about more than cake, and that was probably a combination of new recipes you would develop for the book, as well as sort of this back catalog of recipes you would develop throughout the years of being in restaurants. But here it's a totally different subject. Where did the recipes come from?
I mean, all new recipes. Some of them were stolen from my mom, shamelessly.
Not shamelessly.
Yeah. Well, I give her credit. I say, this is my mom's famous, sesame dipping sauce, or this is how she blah, blah, blah. But it was hard to actually extract that information from her because she would just be like, I don't know, it's these things and it's until it's done. And you're like, okay, I have no idea. So I just watch and observe and look at what, and see how the order she did things in. And then I would kind of tweak it to be seasoned the way I wanted it. But yeah, no, it was all from zero. And it was challenging in a different way than the baking recipes because I was realizing that so much of how I cook for savory style stuff is like very intuitive and often not using a recipe. And, when you're making a broth, like I'm going by feel, I'm going by sensorial cues, how much something's reduced when I'm throwing things in the pot that I just have laying around. I mean, it was hard to be like, well, how do I explain how I do this sort of amorphous thing? Like, how can I, is this really how I would do it? I wouldn't set a timer for 3 hours. I would just wander back into the kitchen when I felt like it was ready, So that was actually tricky, but I basically, I set myself up at my parents' home in San Diego. They were living in China. I was out there house sitting for them. And it was sort of my writing retreat, like no distractions, big kitchen, lots of space to have concurrent projects. And I banged out about 65 recipes spanning all aspects of the hot pot meal. So hot pot, I mean, it's tricky. Like hot pot is kind of a recipe-less meal. And I wanted to write a cookbook about it. So I knew I needed recipes. It couldn't just be like, buy all this stuff and eat it.
Right.
I tried to think about it in terms of like, well, what kind of recipes would I want if I was having a hot pot feast? I like projects. I like making things from scratch. So I knew I wanted flaky breads and dumplings. I love those things. Crunchy salads to kind of kickstart the palate, the crucial dipping sauces that kind of bring all the blanched food into focus, and a variety of broths. And it was hilarious sharing the table of contents with my parents because they were like, whoa, we've never done all this. They would start hot pot with water. My mom is not making broth. They were very intrigued by how I had expanded this framework to include like all these recipes.
Would they ever make a recipe?
No, there is this Asian parent look.
Yeah.
that they give you when you do something that's like off label?
They're like, what? Why would you?
Yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm like, let me read between the lines. What do you really feel about this?
Exactly. Anyone of Asian persuasion knows the look.
Yeah, she's like, it's so much work, Natasha. This is so much work. And I'm like, Mom, the books are about fostering a love of prep and of cooking and of enjoying that moment and hopefully not seeing it as work and as a task because the moment that I do, it stops being fun for me. And that's what the baking book is about too. It's why I like hulling strawberries for an hour because I don't mind that task. I enjoy it. And I don't mind crimping dumplings because I think it's kind of fun. And in the book, I'm like, put on a record you like, sit in a comfy chair, like get your station set up. But yeah, I think she's just like, oh, that's a lot. But since then, she has made some of the broths from the book. So it's awesome to see her trying and hopping in.
Cool.
Well, let's get into your mom. She illustrated your first book. She illustrates this book. Page 72 and 73, there's the lucky 8 hot pot personalities, and it kind of seems like sort of like New Yorker-y, where there's these little like figurines, like these little heads that are illustrated with different personality types. So tell me a little bit about how you worked together with your mom to figure out what illustrations were going to be in the book and to have space for these little sidebars.
And to also be her employer and the person who commissions art.
Yeah,
Good
Artisan
point.
paid her. I don't think she expected to get paid. She was just like, I'll do this for you. I love you. But no, she was part of the team and it was incredible. It was really, really incredible.
Was it part of the photo budget?
It was a totally separate commission. No, I mean, I paid for the photos. Yeah, anything having to do with the photo shoot, that came right out of my advance.
Oh, but the illustrations didn't.
No.
Oh, wow.
So she worked with the art department on that. She did everything by hand in notebooks. She did black and white ink illustrations, and then she did some mixed media pieces with ink wash and acrylic paint. She refused to learn how to scan anything in professionally, so she ended up shipping all of this stuff to Hachette, which frankly terrified me. I was like, I know you can go to FedEx or whatever and we can do this, but she was like, I don't want to learn. No, I don't like, they'll do it. That's what they do. And I was like, okay, all right. So, but now I have all the hard copies and they're incredibly precise and detailed and they're so beautiful. And basically my mom, she's a classically trained oil painter. She had never done professional illustration until these books. As a fine artist, kind of thought it was commercial work that was maybe beneath her, I like in so many words. I think she was like, that's a different skill set, that's a different world. I'm an artist, I make oil paintings. But basically, when I reached out to her, living in New York, my parents are in California, my mom sends me birthday cards in the mail, postcards, and she would always write these notes to me and then add these little doodles of her cat or of me, little cartoons. That was really where I got the idea when I was working on the proposal and was asking her about it. I just took photos of some mail she had sent me and I was like, just exactly like this, like these little cartoons. And they're so funny. And I just was like, can you just do it like this? And that was really all the art direction that I gave her.
Amazing.
She's so prolific. I mean, we probably used maybe 30 or 40% of what she submitted. She would do a fish jumping out of a pond, but she would do like 5 fish. And then I would pick the fish that I liked. It was really incredible because I felt like the material of the hot pot actually suited her sensibility so much. Like I could feel the confidence in the material that she was having come through. The chapter openers, especially, I wanted More Than Cake and Everyone Hot Pot to kind of be companions aesthetically. Like they look good together. There are certain aesthetic similarities. She's done the chapter openers for both. Big, bold swipes of color and these little illustrations. You kind of get lost in those illustrations. Like I kind of like a Where's Waldo. You just start gazing at all the little funky details. They're so intricate. They're incredible. And on an emotional level, I think that as I get older, as my mom gets older, I think I was looking for a new way of relating and communicating with her that wasn't, are you taking your vitamins every day? Have you filed your taxes yet? I think like housekeeping stuff you see a lot with immigrant parents worrying is like the love language sort of. And I was realizing we were having these long phone calls where none of those normal topics were coming up at all. We were just talking about making stuff. I can't really even articulate like how moving that part of the process was for me to be for 40 and it's not too late to connect with an older person in your life, an elder, a parent, a relative, whatever, divine something new out of that relationship. They were telling me stories I had never heard before. My mom was like, when I moved to the US after I married your dad, like, I didn't know how to cook. That's why we had hot pot so much. We would have parties and I
Very
didn't know how to
smart. Your
cook.
mom is very smart.
Yeah. But
Right.
the fact that I resonated with that so much, because when I was in my 20s and broke, that was how I wanted to make friends in new cities I lived in. So that's where I think I saw the book as this opportunity of being like, hey, maybe you too can use this meal as a way for you to like make new friends or build community or get to know your farmer's market better, et cetera. All the millions of reasons why this is the great meal. So it was very, yeah, moving to have her open up with me a bit and talk about some of those stories that I had, one, never asked her, and two, she hadn't offered up either.
Oh, that's really sweet. So she came in to do the illustrations once the book was in first pages. How did you organize that in terms of the book making process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually asked her to do a very small set for the proposal. Let's do dumplings, let's do a little hot pot, let's, just like a little whiff. And then as soon as the manuscript was done, and that was something where Judy Prey, my editor, came in and was like, now's a good moment for you to plug your mom in. Now that we know basically where the illustrations could go and where they're needed, especially because again, there's so much text that might not have an accompanying photograph, because it's not recipe based. So, like the hot pot personalities, decor, table setting tips, like etiquette, do's and don'ts, ingredient spotlights, all of that stuff was text I had a great time writing, but knew there wasn't going to be room for a photo. So, I think I wrote a list of here are the moments, kept it very loose. I also gave her the manuscript to look at as well. And so she could actually see and read all the things as well. So, but yeah, I tried to keep it very open to what she wanted to do and focusing on the places where there wasn't going to be a photo and I thought could benefit from a little whimsy or like a little instructional something. It was fascinating to see also how Nina Simino at Artisan also interpreted her work once it was submitted, because she was noticing things I didn't notice. Like it was her idea to tease out a detail from one of my mom's illustrations to become the spine of the book.
Oh.
It was so cool. And I think that was really cool for my mom as well to see, like, once the illustration is done, how they get interpreted for a cookbook use.
It sounds to me that the illustrations were this energizing part of the process, but I'm also imagining, we alluded to this earlier in the conversation, that the photo shoot, on the other hand, was tough. We were looking at the photos and we're just like, oh, this looks like a different place. Like
Because it was.
these beautiful spreads. We're like, but that can't be the same place. So you survived.
I mean, luckily, I just had the most superstar game team. The reason for that was because it's hot pot, there are these 4 themed feasts. So the book has quite a lot of lifestyle photography in it. It's not just beauties and heroes of dishes that could be done in a studio with strategic different backgrounds.
Lifestyle is so hard.
So hard. The 4 menus are different. I need them to visually also feel like they're happening in 4 different places. There's a vegan menu. I wanted that to be outside in my backyard. There's a fancier surf and turf meal. There's a blah, 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 and the only thing I could think of based on my budget and what I could afford and opportunities I had available to me and to shoot in New York. And it's one of those things where as an author, as a producer, you're like, no, this is going to be fine. Like we can do this. And then the reality is that we were loading in and out, breaking a set down 4 times across 6 days during a heat wave in June in these lofts in Chinatown with stairs, running out, getting ingredients. And another tricky thing with the planning was that we would be shooting heroes and beauties of dishes on one day. And then Tina Huang, the food stylist, couldn't even scrap that mise en place because we might need that dish again for a menu for a lifestyle photo 2 days later. So she would have to hang on to all this stuff. I really pride myself on writing a tight, efficient shot list, getting it done. Like that is a puzzle that I want to solve and make easier for everyone. But there were still moments of like, gosh, especially by that 6th day when we were shooting outside in my backyard. I think it was like 98 degrees. The AC in my
Oh,
apartment was
wow.
just not cutting it. We were running in and out, trying to keep everything looking good. And that's where Tina, as a stylist, really was absolutely indispensable because I just didn't know the first thing about keeping raw greens looking perky and keeping ice looking full and not watered down, and all of these tricks that she had. I was like, I only know how to style a cookie I baked off 5 days ago that looks the same today as it did 5 days ago. So she really made everything look luscious and abundant. A big part of being a producer, I think, is about morale. You've got to make sure your team is strong and feeling good and has what they need, and that's just not something I'm all that experienced in. So that was definitely a learning curve, but we were a lean team, and I think that helped expedite stuff. I mean, I wouldn't do anything differently, but we shot More Than Cake at my parents' house in San Diego. That is kind of the ideal shooting location for me because it was a home with lots of nooks where we could create different vibes and sets, quote unquote. So we got a lot of lifestyle, but we didn't have to go anywhere. We just were in the same place the whole time. And this was more challenging being in that New York City chaos of being in Ubers and running around. So it was just a different tone.
Now that you've survived and the book's been out for a number of months and you're going back out on the road, what have you been hearing from folks and what's like the biggest learning experience that you've gained from this project?
I'm definitely in this very reflective state right now. Some things have surprised me, some things haven't surprised me. For better or for worse, I think we're all kind of gauging how our cookbooks are received through social media. And with More Than Cake, right out of the gate, my feed was flooded with people tagging me on recipes, stuff they were making, sharing stuff. I think something that's really surprised me and maybe almost a little unnerving is how much like less of that I'm seeing with recipes from the book. It's making me second guess myself. Like, are people making the recipes? Because the stuff I get tagged on will be like, hot pot night. Thanks for the inspo, Natasha. And it'll be like a beautiful spread of like tofu and fish balls and, veggies and stuff. But people are tagging me on certain recipes. But I think every author kind of is like, I wonder which will be the handful of recipes that get made a lot, that, kind of take off and have a life of their own. And, More Than Cake had that for sure. And I don't know if I've really felt that yet from readers. It's more I've been getting that feedback from being on tour, having so many hot pot events and at butcher shops and restaurants and bakeries and bookstores and seeing what they're making and getting feedback directly from chefs and bakers, which is incredible. So much fun just to see how chefs at that level are engaging with the material. It's like a huge honor, really special feeling. So I think like, yeah, that social media piece is interesting. I mean, with the Lunar New Year, it was just so nonstop. I felt like I couldn't keep up with any of it. With press, a lot of that stuff comes out all at once. And I felt like I couldn't even like take it in or appreciate it really. Like I would see a New York Times newsletter about the book and it would just move on to the next thing, the next mention. And I kind of want to go back to all that now and enjoy it a bit more, I think, because it was just
Yes.
so breakneck. because it's fun to reflect on, like, the book's been out since January 28th. All of these intervening months felt so far. And the most surprising thing to me are the number of people that are like, I've never had hot pot before. And your book was what gave me the confidence to do it. And then also meeting people who are Chinese American or Asian American and having them be like, wow, hearing you write about hot pot when you were a kid, that was my experience of it too. I'm getting these two responses and they both feel really meaningful. And being able to be a part of someone's ritual making and traditions, I think, is also a very powerful part of cookbook making. Hoping that people stay engaged with the book and figuring out how to promote, because, I'm going to be promoting this thing till I die. Like,
Right.
I'm still promoting more than cake stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, of course.
It just doesn't stop.
It's not because a new book comes out, the other one doesn't like disappear.
That's right. You
It's
gotta
still
circle
there.
back.
Yeah.
But I think that the touch points for readers, we gauge things so much through social media, and that's very significant stuff. But social media is just a moving target these days, more so than ever. And I think that the most rewarding thing for authors and also cookbook readers and users and cooks is these meaningful touch points that are very human and very real.
Yeah.
So I think that, holding on to those and using that as part of your momentum is extremely important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why I produce such a ridiculously ambitious tour, because I just want to go out and meet people. And finally, like, you are working in this isolating way for so long. And then to finally get to go out, meet people, you have them show you photos of stuff they've made. It's the best, 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 best thing. I love it. I've been looking forward to this for a really, really, really long time.
Wow. If somebody's listening and they have a debut cookbook out and they're thinking about book 2, any words of wisdom or advice you would like to share with them?
The most important thing is to write the book that you want to see in the world. Readers are smart and they know when something is authentically you versus tapping into a trend or what you think will do well. And if you're writing about something that you believe in, no matter how esoteric or niche sounding it seems, there will be people that respond to it purely based on the fact that it's coming from your heart. That was sort of the mantra I told myself when I was nervous that people who followed me for my work around cakes or fundraising would not stick around for this part of my journey. And honestly, I still worry about that. But I think at the end of the day, I'm like, this is the book that I want. And the readers for me will be the readers who understand that and value that.
That's great. Natasha, well, thank you so much for this conversation. Congratulations on book 2, and we'll look forward to see what you do next. But in the meantime, you need to enjoy the ride and keep enjoying your book tours.
Thank you so, so much. This is wonderful.
Before we sign off, I want to tell you about Food Friends, Home Cooking Made Easy. It's a podcast for anyone who really likes shows about cooking and baking. The two hosts, Sonia and Carrie, are former professional chefs and longtime friends, and their show delivers both inspiration and a lot of practical kitchen tips. And what I really love is that they often talk about their favorite cookbooks, new and old, and the recipes that they've cooked from these books. New episodes come out twice a week, and I like to listen when I'm on my way to the market or just anytime I'm looking for some inspiration in the kitchen. Find Food Friends wherever you get your audio, and you can get more information about the show at their Substack, foodfriendspodcast.substack.com.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Here are some other ways to support the show. Go to everythingcookbooks.com and check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch. Or buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you, as always, to our editor, Abby Cirquitella. And until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.